Delphix. Delphix is a database virtualization software company. I'll give you a little bit of my background. So prior to Delphix, I founded a company called Avamar. We pioneered this technology called data deduplication. I sold my first software company to EMC in 2006. We shipped a product that today is $1 billion product. It has 20,000 customers. In the backup space, which is a space that we helped revolutionize, companies used to store the same data over and over again onto tape media. So what we did at Avamar is we stripped out all the redundant data so we could pack it onto disk, making disk better, cheaper, and faster than tape. The database world is interesting because, similar to the backup industry, companies just create incredible numbers of copies of all of their production databases for a number of different reasons. So it's rife with a lot of inefficiency that you can address with smart software. What we do for our customers, and we have 30 of the world's largest Fortune 500 accounts already as customers, what we help them do is run much, much faster on their application projects. Solve their application re-architecture, any major project for their sales forces or for risk management or for any other application that involves a relational database. We help them roll those projects out in a fraction of the time while saving them on a lot of redundant hardware infrastructure. So virtualization is something that's really been proven to make changes in IT. And I think everybody's seen what's happened in the desktop world, as well as on the server world. And what we do for databases is really what VMware provided for the CPU tier. In the database layer, the challenge is that the redundancy is really down at the data tier. So it's all the redundant copies of the files and the blocks that make up a database. So we're very specialized on virtualizing the data files and blocks that make up a database. And if you think about the size of the giant enterprise markets, clearly the x86 market was maybe the biggest enterprise wave in the last century. Maybe the third largest market might have been the networking wave, like the Cisco hardware wave. But the second biggest market by quite a large margin is probably the relational database market. Oracle alone in apps, middleware, and databases drives $30 billion in annual software revenue. It's just a massive market. And it has incredible amounts of structured redundancy. So again, what we help companies do is roll out their projects faster, cut their hardware by 10 to 20x, and we also can mitigate risk by giving them this time machine capability over their data. Today, the problem with production databases and applications is there's this massive big data exhaust. I'm going to get to the demo at the end of a couple slides. For every production database that runs PeopleSoft or ERP or your financial system or the website that consumers touch, big companies and medium-sized companies create development, testing, QA, UAT, pilot, training environments. So they create this long cascade of redundant copies. In addition to that, they have to shuffle data from all these environments. So they have to move all the data from point A to point B to point C to point D and back again. And then they have to protect all the data in all these environments. So they'll create disk copies, they'll create tape copies. And the crazy thing about all of these redundant copies and all the data they shuffle around from place to place is that if you had X-ray vision and you could look at the data blocks that make up those data files, you'd see that 98% of it is the same exact data over and over again. So what we do is we strip out that redundancy and allow you to create virtual copies instead. The big impact for our customers is instead of having to go through a bunch of shared infrastructure and having to go ask DBA, server, storage, backup teams to create an environment, we allow them to skip all these complex processes, these really complex, time-consuming management decisions because physical databases cost too much, and we allow them to get out and create their environment self-service in minutes and seconds. With our product, even if you don't have 5 years or 10 years of DBA experience, anybody in this room could create another copy or refresh a 10 terabyte, a 20 terabyte, a 40 terabyte Oracle database inside of 2 or 3 clicks. So we've really taken consumerization and driven it to the most complex part of the database ecosystem. So instead of all these redundant copies with the data moving from environment to environment, what we do is we create a single virtual data authority. So our software drops into your environment or into any large business's environment, runs on their standard servers, their private cloud, their public cloud. We actually work in all of them. And what we do is we'll connect to your databases wherever they are. We'll sync with the data, and like TiVo, we're recording all the changes to the data environment. So we create one isolated data environment with full recording of all changes. Now, anytime you want another copy for development, QA, staging, UAT, operational reporting, pilots, training, all the reasons that businesses create copies. You just go to Delphix, we create a virtual copy. It takes no additional time and no additional space for us to create a virtual copy. So it really transforms the economics of how databases function, even Oracle databases in large business environments. Another thing that we help with a lot of our customers, big Fortune 10 banks, all the way down to middle market accounts, is we help them unwind their transactions or unwind data errors. The applications that we touch, websites, and all the apps that you have in mobile devices, they eventually back into some Oracle database or some relational database that hosts financial information, transactional information. Errors will percolate through the stack. Data gets deleted, data gets entered incorrectly. Our customers can simply go back to any point in time, fire open a virtual copy, and be able to access data they can use to repair their production environment. So we provide some tools that just don't exist in physical infrastructure. Because physical infrastructure, you can't build tools like these around the infrastructure. KLA-Tencor is one of our customers. They're a Fortune 1000 chip manufacturer in Silicon Valley. This is a true story from their environment. They were literally able to increase the number of projects they could manage with about 140 developers from 2 every 6 months to 11 projects in the next 6 months after they rolled out Delphix. And you might scratch your head and wonder, how could database virtualization transform application development to such a large extent? The reason why is there's so much waiting around on the development teams and the project teams for database environments. And they keep running into these roadblocks where they didn't know they need a new environment, or they're stepping on each other's toes, and they could actually do things faster if they could just get one additional environment. In our world, because the economics fall to close to 3 to 5% of physical infrastructure, you can let them have the next environment. They can have access to fresh data. They can create the new environment for this one-off test that will get them through one knothole in their development cycle. Other large customers like Procter & Gamble buy us just for cost savings. Other customers, they'll use us. We have this layer of technology we call our Datavisor that can reach out to multiple different source databases, applications in different environments, pull all of the data in, and we can deliver 5 synchronized databases all at the exact same time for your development environment. So it's not just a one-to-one environment. We are many-to-one, many-to-many. And our technology will bridge all the data movement and all the data delivery in virtual containers. Let me show you guys a little bit of the product. All right. So what you can see here is in the middle is a time flow for a database. And we can record any point in time you want for a database for as long as you want in a fraction of the space it would normally take. You can pick any point in time down to the second, and if you select the time you want, you can provision a database in our world in under 3 clicks. So literally, from logging in to selecting a database to clicking finish, we can create a 10 terabyte database that might have taken you 6 months and $1 million worth of hardware. We can do that virtually in just seconds and a couple clicks. So here we've actually gone through and created a first virtual database. And we'll actually go through and create another one also in about another couple seconds. But the key is not only can we go to a specific point in time, with our product we log every single transaction that you have in your environment. So you can go down to the second or down to a specific transaction boundary. Here we're going to go to something like 3:54 p.m. and 55 seconds. Sometimes you need all of your databases at an exact time point because that's the only way your application has consistency and can make sense of the data. So clearly with our product, if we're sourcing data from multiple different databases, you can just pick 5, 10 of them and say, I want them all yesterday at the exact same time. And we'll deliver to the right team at the right time at a fraction of the cost and complexity. It's pretty easy to manage our product, so we really believe in intuitive manageability. Our self-service interface allows you to quickly see exactly how much resources we're taking up on the physical infrastructure where we're installed. You can see how much storage we're saving. You can see all the jobs that have been run. I sync data from this environment. I sync data from that environment. I deliver this virtual database to that team. We can allow you to set priority classes and performance. So you can see this virtual database is taking too much of the overall performance that's available in the environment. I want to cap this environment. I want to set a service level for this environment. And then it's very easy from a single dashboard view to get a quick grasp of exactly what's happened. Here on this Delphix server, we've created 9 virtual databases. So one piece of software has gone out and eaten 5 pieces of physical hardware, physical copies that would have consumed physical space, run from a fraction of the space and time. The time flow ratio there, that 35:1, means we're storing 35 days worth of database copies in the space of a single copy. Normally that would take you 35x the amount of storage, or at least something like 15 to 20x, depending on what kind of technology you're using. All right, so I finished that part early. I'll field questions.
The old relational databases versus the new NoSQL.
Yeah, so the question
any
is...
difference to you or in your product? Or?
It's really market opportunities to our company. So our stack, a lot of our stack works for all the relational databases. We started with Oracle because it's really where the biggest part of the market is. It's like Manhattan, the geography of the database world. But we can bridge to all the relational databases. We can bridge to future containers as well. We support a couple data warehouses, Oracle Exadata, Oracle Data Warehouse. But we can bridge to NoSQL and some of the other data types. It's just that in the grand scheme of things today, if you look at where people spend money, where they have redundant hardware, the relational database market is huge. 30% of that is the data warehouse market. The big data market is the little revenue market today. Over time, it will grow, but applications are so embedded, so customized in every single industry that it's very hard for them to transition. It will take a long time for them to transition. So we're taking down the biggest addressable market first, and then we'll add on additional markets over time.
Who stores the virtual data? That's you or the customer?
Who stores the virtual data? So our customers generally will buy our software. They'll drop it into their environment. Now, sometimes their environment might be in the cloud, or it might be in their private cloud. It might be in a service provider that's providing a service on Delphix. They drop our software in. It's run on their systems, their storage.
It's up to them.
Yeah, we just sell software.
You focus on application development, not production, is that right? Is there, I mean, obviously performance is a big question.
Yeah, so the question is on performance, and do we focus on production? What's actually surprising for me, having built one software company, and this one is my second, is how quickly the big enterprises bought our product and how quickly they started running production workloads on Delphix. So we have a lot of customers like Boeing Credit Union. They run a lot of workloads that used to sit on production. They've moved all onto our virtual databases. So a lot of their reporting, a lot of their ad hoc queries, things that would have hit production because we're synced with production in near real time. So you've got some isolated environment where you can do whatever you want to do. So you got a lot of queries that you wouldn't normally let run on physical production because you've got a transactional database that matters. Well, suddenly you can allow all those users to run what would be production workloads on the virtual environment. Performance is pretty good. Typically, our software, on average, one piece of our software eats 20 pieces of physical hardware, and customers will not see degradation performance past what they would expect. So, on average, 20 physical databases get crammed into one piece of our software. And then customers will see, like, when you have 3, 4, 5 virtual databases, sometimes they'll see slightly better performance. For some reason at Facebook, they see 3x the performance in the virtual environment. But some customers, depending if they give us servers that have less power, you'll see some degradation. So you get the whole span.
All right, no question. But this software doesn't seem to apply for a startup all the way to a big company. Where are you focused, and do you sell products that each end of the market?
So the question is on where do we sell product? And today we're having a lot of traction in large accounts. So our salespeople, they need to make their quotas. They're going to focus where they can make the biggest return. But we do have medium-sized businesses and small businesses that buy the product as well. It's just a matter of where we're spending our time.
How do you deal with data sensitivity? I mean, there are a lot of cases where, say, in production, you're going to have credit cards, social security numbers that you can't bring back into other environments in their exact live form. How do you deal with that?
So the question is data sensitivity, like credit card data, and how do we deal with that? So that's actually one of the driving use cases for Delphix. A number of the banks have bought our product for that. eBay rolled us out for that as well, for one of their different properties. So with today's world, you have production databases that have credit card information, your home address, your billing address. What a lot of companies do is they'll create copies in development, testing, QA, and staging, so they have a wide surface area of risk. And then the user's roles, privileges, entitlement, security is not the exact same as production. You'll have non-prod DBAs and systems that work So you have a large surface area. What happens with Delphix is we become a single point of control, so we really shrink the surface area. So in a single chain of custody stored in Delphix, you can see exactly who has open data, who moved data, who refreshed data, and you can shut down data for all of these different environments. Then the second thing that we do is we automate the masking or the distribution of masked obfuscated data. So Informatica is one of our customers. They sell a masking product. And what will happen is you can mask the data into a virtual environment or a physical environment. We'll pick up the masked data. So instead of having everybody's social security numbers, they'll swap in fake numbers for each of the social security data for each person, for each record. And then what we do is we connect to that, and we'll distribute those copies through development, test, QA stage environment. So we work two ways on the data security issue.
Do you just know how it works behind the scenes, and what are you set into the file system level, and how do you handle completing rights for the different?
So the question is, how do we work behind the scenes? So there's really a couple components to our stack. At the very top level, we have a management layer that includes a self-service interface, web services, CLI, so we can really integrate well with enterprise or medium-tier business environments. And then the next level down, we have a Datavisor, which is really database specific. So that's what's sourcing data from relational databases, pulling the data in, recording it, and then allowing us to provision virtual copies to each environment. Down at the lowest level, we have DXFS. It's a dedicated file system and volume manager that is managing the data blocks that make up database files. And instead of just creating copies over and over again of all these database files that are resident in backups or in all your development and test environments, we basically share the data blocks that are the same across all the environments and just fold in change data, store change data for each database that's coming in. So it's really DXFS that's handling the virtualization component of the data.
Now let's say you have an environment with 17 80 terabyte databases. What's the average implementation time to get that Delphix implemented?
So the question is, let's say you have an environment with 17 80 terabyte databases. I think the largest databases that are being loaded in Delphix today are 40, 50 terabytes. But we could load an 80 terabyte database. It might take a weekend or two to load it into Delphix. Once it's loaded into Delphix, you can stamp out virtual databases in minutes. Because we already have all the data once it's loaded. That loading time will depend on the size of the databases, as well as any bottlenecks moving the data into Delphix, and then the performance of the environment at the target where we're running. So how fast can the hardware drink the data? But once we're loaded in, we only need change data to maintain synchronization. And the beauty of the virtual databases is when I create the next 80 terabyte database, I don't have to move any data. I don't have to get any more storage. I don't have to copy anything. I just show you a virtual view of the data. I just connect it to the database server that needs to see the data. So it's a one-time implementation cost,
Okay.
and then everything else is virtual in fact.
Basically, from start of project to sign off, you will have usually not more than 1-2 months in cleaning everything?
We often have, we can often stand up virtual databases your developers can use in an hour or two. Most of the time, I'd say 80%, if you look at our, we actually track all these things down to a fairly fine grain. 80% of our deals, we have virtual databases up and running within 2 days. We've had customers just read our documentation, stand up our environment, and do it all by themselves. We've had customers actually track their standard physical installation of one database copy versus installing Delphix and creating a virtual database. We'll beat them on the first installation compared to a physical database environment. But 2 months is very rare that we'd see. I mean, you'd have to roll back to like our first shipments to see the 2-month process. Our very first customers, like Staples was our first customer. Some of those, they took 2 months. But that doesn't happen anymore.
I hope maybe I missed something, and as virtualization is a little bit mysterious to me, but what about disaster recovery?
So the question is disaster recovery. We get used for disaster recovery a lot. So actually, Staples Corporate Express, what they do with our product is they use us to sync across the WAN from their physical production environment, and then they use our virtual copies for DR testing. If they actually had a data center failure, you could just run in our virtual environment. They'll also use the same footprint for development, testing, and QA. So you can use us for all of those things: DR, backup, operational reporting, development. testing, all of those are features of the product or use cases of the product.
Do I understand correctly that once you instrument your production database to run on this open Delphix stack, going forward, the applications essentially use the same access method as before to the database, and everything is going right through the virtualized files?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So at the application level, they're going to connect to the same database server as physical or virtual. So application level, you won't see any changes. DBA is looking at the database files, all of the same data. They behave exactly like physical databases. And then down at the data tier, it's just fueling to Delphix software, which is making it look like full physical databases.
Time for one more, and then Jed and his team will be around for later.
Who else is in this space, competitor-wise?
Yeah, so who else is in the space competitive-wise? We've been kind of alone in the market for the first couple of years. Today, all the way to 2 years in the market, approaching 2 years in the market, we aren't baked off against anybody. Nobody puts us head-to-head against another company and says, let's try you versus this product or that product. We do have the big vendors are all starting to put out marketecture that sounds similar to ours. As soon as we put out a white paper or a new release on this or that feature, they'll actually write things that mimic ours. But what happens is customers will ask them, can you do these couple things, and they can't. So nobody actually bakes us head-to-head. Competition is coming. It's a big market. I think the market is potentially as big as the entire server virtualization market. So we're going to have competition. It's just a matter of time. We're building for competition.
Thanks.